You guys are in for an absolute treat today on the podcast. We're bringing on my soul sister, and honestly, who I thought was a future version of me when I saw her speak at the plant-based conference. She gave Stevie Nicks slash Brittney in the future vibes, and I just had to talk to her, especially when I found out that she also had a chihuahua named Rupert. I mean, what are the magical cosmic coincidence that that would happen? So today we're bringing on Victoria Moran, who is an amazing author, podcast host, and fellow vegan who is out there just shining her light, making a huge impact. So we can't wait to bring on all the wisdom that you have to share. But I want to start with this concept that you taught when you were speaking at the plant-based movement. And it has really stuck with me because I'm a Libra and we're in Libra season. You mentioned using fine china and making sure that you don't wait for those celebration moments to really bring that love and beauty to your plate. Can you talk a little bit about that and that specific concept? That just stood out to me. Out of all the learnings and education and the science behind veganism, like that to me really, even a year later, still rings true. So what made you share that at such an epic conference?
Yeah, oh, sure. Well, and thank you for having me. And the mutual attraction was just there. I think we're soul sisters, and we got a soul brother on here too. So bless you both. Thank you for having me. So that thing that you're talking about, the thing about the good dishes and do it now and jump right in and enjoy life, is that now is the only time there is, and we may as well enjoy it. And I haven't always been like that. I always used to be very much stuck in the past. I do believe in reincarnation and that kind of thing. And I just really have such a kind of peace when I think about the past. I love old architecture. I feel just calmer when I'm in a place that's a little bit older, when things are a little bit vintage. I like that a lot. And then also there's this idea of it's all preparation for what you're trying to grow your soul, you're trying to become enlightened, you're trying to leave this planet better than you found it. So there's all this past and future stuff going on, and what gets lost is life. The actual life that is given to us nanosecond by nanosecond. So use the good dishes. And I understand, newlyweds in their 20s, they might want to save them for 6 months or so and use them the first time for a big holiday. But believe me, when you've been around a while, and I've been around a while, what are you saving them for? So live right now, live today. And I'm going to quote to you one of my great gurus. Although she didn't really live, she was a composite of people who influenced an author named Patrick Dennis, and she's called Auntie Mame. So you can read the book. You can also rent the vintage movie 1958, Auntie Mame, starring Rosalind Russell. And she inspired me from the time I saw that movie the first time when I was 8 years old with this concept of live. She would say, life is a banquet and most poor suckers are starving to death. And so I think about that inspiration in my life. In those days, I wanted an Auntie Mame, and now I hope to be one for other people to just inspire what you talk about in your show, just lifting everything up. And one way you can elevate is use the nice dishes.
I love it. It really speaks so much to my Libra soul and just bringing beauty to every single moment because you are not promised the next day. So I love this concept so much. Now let's back it up a little bit because we met at a plant-based conference. So already we knew that we were both vegan, but how did you get into this lifestyle? You have been around the block. You've written books. You've been in the industry. You've been an advocate and a leader, and you've done so much incredible work. Can you take us back to what was that turning point in your life where you're like, I think I'm going to be vegan?
Well, there was prehistory to that because when I was looking at veganism originally, it was weird to be vegetarian. I mean, vegan was just, people would say, did people bother you about being vegan or raising your child vegan? It's like, are you kidding? It was so weird. They didn't even know how to bother me. But I first became enthralled with the idea of not eating animals when I was 5 years old. I brought the 4 food groups home from first grade, and my nanny, who was kind of my first guru too, she and Auntie Mame, she was into reincarnation, and she'd studied Rosicrucianism. She'd been a Christian Scientist. She'd been kind of around the block spiritually. She's a very eclectic woman. And she didn't like the idea of the government telling people how to eat. So I recited these 4 food groups. And she said, there are some people who don't eat any meat, and they're called vegetarians. And I remember thinking, ooh, I like them. I don't know why, but I like them. And just this idea, there's so many ways to do life that aren't necessarily the ways that I'm seeing around here. So I tried to be vegetarian when I was 13. It lasted 3 months. And then I just got tired of fruit cocktail and cottage cheese because I didn't really know what else to eat. But it was there. So what really was the turnaround for me on the vegetarian part was discovering yoga when I was 17. And at that time, it's hard for people to believe now because yoga's all over everywhere. But then it was weird. And people knew it was some kind of foreign thing. And maybe it was that fermented milk thing. And maybe it was the thing of where you stare at your navel. But either way, it's dangerous, so stay away, which of course made it all the more fascinating to me. So I read the 3 books that were in the library, and they all said if you want to be serious about yoga and about your spiritual growth, you really need to stop eating animals. So that was the beginning. Hadn't heard of veganism at that time. But a few years later, I did. The American Vegan Society, which still exists, and I always want to give them a shout out, was it. I mean, it was there. There was no PETA. There was no PCRM. There was the American Vegan Society. That was it. And the people there really believed in me. Jay Dinshaw, the founder, who has passed away, and his lovely wife, Freya, who is very much alive and still running things there with her daughter. And they believed in me even when I would fall off the wagon. And I fell off quite a bit because I was a practicing binge eater. That had been a problem since I was a child. I had not overcome it. And ultimately, through a 12-step program for eating addiction, I was able to just make the connection of, you know what, if I seriously turn my will and my life over to the care of a higher power, I'll have the choice in food. And I finally did, maybe for the first time in my life. And of course, I chose vegan. And that was 1983. So raised my daughter vegan. She is now a professional stunt performer and aerialist. And it's been a really good way to spend several decades.
You know, it's amazing because it really does seem like so much of what we are discovering and so much of what the path is almost like this rebel path. It's like this new way that so many people are like so excited about being a part of. In the beginning, I mean, it was like getting tattoos. You know, when we first started getting tattoos, people were like, well, you're never going to get hired for a job. What's going to happen when you're 60? And like, well, we're going to look cool. I mean, that's pretty much what's going to happen. And so it was for us, it's been the same way. Yoga the same way, going vegan the same way. And for me, you know, it was interesting because we went vegan because of like just wanting to be healthier. You know, we'd read so much about just the health benefits of it. It wasn't from any kind of animal perspective. And along the same path, within the same few months, I found yoga. And it was fascinating because so much of what they were talking about was that. And then you start following Eastern traditions, you start practicing what they're saying. And taking the meat out does make there's a feeling that you get. There's something that happens like in your body, and you just feel heavier, for lack of it. It's not that you're more full. It's like there's a heaviness, and it feels like so oftentimes in yogic traditions or tantric traditions, you're trying to move energy up and down the spine, and it feels like almost like you can't move it well enough. Like once you become used to that, there's energy inside your body, and that you can move it, and that it does move. When I find that when I ate heavy meat-based diets, I couldn't move the energy around. I couldn't get to where I wanted to be in yoga. Like it was like there was something that was keeping me away from it. And so as an experiment, we just eliminated it. We'll just take it out for a while. And the feeling was so different. How I moved through life was different. And I don't think that I would have noticed that had I not been practicing yoga at the time. I don't know that that's the way it would have been, but it's amazing. They were all kind of on this like similar storyline of like a little bit rebellious. It takes a little bit of rebellion. Going against the grain is not easy to do. Like you're constantly going to bump up against some sort of person saying, hey, this is weird. You shouldn't be doing it this way. You may wake up that serpent in the spine. You know, it's like everyone thinks that yoga is this wild thing. And then once you start doing it, you find that it becomes this personal connection to who you are. And it almost becomes like this trip of self-discovery. It has these benefits that you wouldn't find on a blood test. there's all these benefits that end up going along. And to you talking about
like empathy,
yeah. And to you talking about overcoming like eating things, like there's so much involved in self-discovery about why do we do that, and what does nourishment mean, and how does food play a role into that, and how is our mind. And it's like, this is such more of a conversation than just the animal part of it, even though that's so big. It's so much a part of like making your own decisions. One of the things that you said that continuously blows me away that people don't realize, I feel like, until too late, is that you can pick the lifestyle that you want. And you can decide what partner you want, what kind of job you want to go to, how you want to dress. Like, you don't have to live to be somebody different than who you are.
And just follow culture. And that's where I think the courage comes from, is to break the cultural norms and say, I feel like I want to do something different. And you have the courage to do that. And it's really cool to see how you've done that with your life. And even when before it was even weird to be vegan, you were already experimenting that and following your soul's path. One thing I love so much about the yogic practice is they say that your age is reflected by the flexibility of your spine. So can you talk about your upcoming book on Age Like a Yogi? Because it takes all of these principles, is eating clean, clearing out the system, making sure that you're high vibing and you're moving your body and you can let that energy flow through. Can you give us like a little insider sneak peek as to what we can expect to read in this beautiful new book that you're launching?
Oh, I'm so excited. And thank you for asking me about it. So Age Like a Yogi has been gestating for quite a while, about 4 years, and it will be out in January. So the point of Age Like a Yogi, it's twofold, actually. It's to use the yogic principles, the philosophic yogic principles, to approach the oncoming years with courage instead of fear. And I can say, because I'm 74, that it is different. I mean, I've had a wonderful life. I've always been really healthy and all that. And all through my 60s, it was like, what is this aging thing? There is no aging thing. Oh my gosh. And then I turned 70 and things started happening just in the world around me and things in my own body. I didn't need glasses until I was 70. And then it was like, what did I do wrong? Ding, 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 ding. So that's something so important for all of us in this health world to know. It's not always that we do something wrong. It's just because this is physical life. And the nature of physical life is that the animal or the plant is hatched or birthed or grows up out of the ground, reaches maturity, has the opportunity to reproduce, starts to decline, and ultimately dies. That's the life cycle of physical beings. So the idea, especially when we get older, that if we're not in some kind of colossal perfect health and fall out of an apple tree at 96, we've done something wrong, is just so sad. And I know people in this movement who have come into ill health and whatever, and they haven't even reached out for help because they're so ashamed. They feel like they should have done something differently. So I want to be really clear that even though I'm writing a book that has to do with vitality in the later decades, it's also about accepting things that come and using that beautiful philosophic Raja Yoga path to be able to be here for a great life in this body and a beautiful transition into whatever comes next. The other part of Age Like a Yogi, other than the spiritual part, which is quite a bit of it, is Ayurvedic self-care. And Ayurveda is yoga's sister science. They grew up together. And yet most of us discovered yoga long before we ever heard of Ayurveda. That was probably true for you guys too. And what I have learned is that the reason that happened is that when India was a British colony, the British got to be really good colonizers because they did a lot of it, and they learned that they needed to keep people's religion and their spiritual practices alone because people would rise up if you attacked those. So they allowed for the yogic traditions, the Hinduism, Jainism, all that to proceed unimpeded. But things like Ayurveda, which were considered cultural, they stomped on. And so Ayurveda was not allowed for the whole time that India was a British colony. So as we were getting, books and writings, I mean, we like ancestors, even in the 1800s, this was happening, and there was this exchange of ideas. Ayurveda wasn't part of that. It came more a little bit in the mid-late 20th century. So what I love about Ayurveda is that it's healthcare, but it's also self-care. So in India, there are 6,000 Ayurvedic hospitals. You really have a choice. If you need healthcare, you can decide there whether you want Western medicine or whether you want to take the Ayurvedic route. I don't know that we really have much of that available here at all. And then the other thing is that in addition to being a healthcare system that's recognized by the World Health Organization, it's also huge on self-care and what we can do to take care of ourselves, to live more in harmony with nature, to be more in connection with ourselves, with our own rhythms, and then also to understand our specific body type, which is absolutely perfect. It's ours from the moment of conception, and we never need to change it. We don't need to make it better. We just need to be in keeping with that and not let it get out of balance so that it looks like somebody else is perfect. It's got to be our kind of perfect. So those two things together comprise Age Like a Yogi. I believe it's my best writing, and I'm so excited about it.
I want to talk to you about, this is your 14th book, is that right? 14. So you've always been a writer. You've always known, like, this is the path I want to be on. Can you just, I think there's like several professions that people always want to be in. Everyone wants to be like an actor, everyone wants to be an athlete, and everybody wants to be a writer. It seems like those are things that really come up, and it seems like there's this massive barrier to entry for almost every single one. Can you talk about how, like, as a writer, how do you become inspired? How do you get the idea? How do you think, oh my gosh, that's got to be my next book? Like, when do you feel like the passion just hits you and you're saying, I've got to be off and running? This is a topic that I have to share.
Yeah, oh, what a good question. That's a writer question. So for me, I always knew that I was a writer. It's not like I want to be a writer. I was a writer. It's all I really knew how to do, writing and speaking. So words are my thing, always have been. In fact, I read recently that there is some newly defined learning disability, nonverbal learning disability. And I think, oh my gosh, I think I have that, because people with that are really good with words. They're terrible at math. They're very bad at spatial kinds of relations and mechanical stuff. And it's like, oh, now everything makes sense. But because I'm a word person, this was something that I knew from the time I was a little kid. This was always where I made the good grades and got the perks, writing, speaking. So that's what I've always done. Now, I have to say that for people who want to write professionally, it would have been a good idea to be born back when I was, or ideally even earlier, because it made a lot more sense to be a professional writer then than now. Very difficult to make a living as a writer. My understanding is that back in the time of Shakespeare, Britain had enacted these very helpful laws. One was that a writer could copyright their work, and another thing was that writers had to be paid. So all of a sudden, this thing that had been a passion back into antiquity was guaranteed to be a profession. But what's happened now with the internet is that those two things are pretty much gone. I mean, I started writing for teen magazines when I was 14 years old, so we're talking 1964. That was the year I went to my first Beatles press conference, and I was getting paid 35 cents a word. And that was in 1964 money. And then, of course, went up over the years. But now to write online, to write for somebody's blog, and we're talking the Huffington Post, or anything else, you almost never get paid. So the idea is, well, you're writing to advertise these other things that you do, which it's what we've got. So there you have it. And yet it really, to me, it cheapened this beautiful, beautiful gift that people have been given to share. So if you are a writer, you have to write. You can't help it. And so you do your best to get it out there. And I guess you either have a trust fund or a day job. It's a difficult way to make a living, but it's a necessary way to be on earth. And if that is combined with a passion for telling stories or for making a change on this earth, and you can do that through your words, then you just have to do it. And I love books. I love publishing. I've always been traditionally published. I know a lot of people self-publish these days, and that certainly makes it much more democratic that people can get out there with their work. I really like publishers because it would take lots and lots and lots of money and expertise to be able to hire a really good editor and a copy editor and a proofreader and an interior designer and a cover designer and all the things that a publisher does. So I'm grateful that I have Monkfish Books for this one sweet little publisher that does spiritual books. And I've been with big publishers and small ones, and there are great things to say about both. One great thing about the little ones is that they pay attention to you. You get to talk to the head people. And that's all good. But, whatever it takes, if you love what you're writing, if you know people need to see it, you'll find a way.
There's a great book called Seth Speaks by Jane Roberts, and she channeled this book. And Seth said in the book, once a speaker, always a speaker. And I find that to be true with authors and writers as well. So it really resonates, everything you're saying. And so many of our listeners that tune into this podcast are those creatives, are those visionaries, light workers who are channels for spirit. And I'm curious, what is your practice or your routine to balance the consistency of showing up and writing, but also self-care so you don't burn out or overthink or get overwhelmed? Like, what does your personal practice look like to be able to show up and write? Do you write every day? Do you write when you're inspired? Do you sit down no matter what? Like, what does your balancing self-care routine look like?
It very much depends. If we were talking 30 years ago, it would be like, well, I'm a writer. I mean, sometimes I go out and speak, but basically I'm a writer. So of course I write every day. That's what I do. But now it's a very different time. So I do all kinds of things, which a lot of people do. So since 2012, you've mentioned that I podcast. I've run Main Street Vegan Academy, so I train vegan lifestyle coaches and educators. I'm part of a beautiful spiritual community for animal advocates called the Compassion Consortium. That was my husband's brainchild, and I'm part of that with him. We're also in the development phase of something that I don't know if it's possible. It looks kind of impossible, but as Alice in Wonderland said, I do half a dozen impossible things before breakfast. So the one of those that I have on my plate is Miss Liberty, which is a feature film about a cow who escapes from a slaughterhouse. It was really my husband's conception, and then we wrote it together. So there's all those things going on. So do I write every day? No, not anymore. Only if I have writing to do, other than my personal journaling. So right now, I'm very much in the final editing process of the book. We're in the production phase, so that means we have galleys, and they look like the book, but there are still mistakes in there. So we're going over those now and getting them all ready. And then in a couple of weeks, I actually get to read the audio book, which is going to be really exciting. A couple of my other books, Main Street Vegan and The Love Powered Diet, are on Audible, but other people read them. And to be able to read this one is really special because it's in the first person and everything. So I do my work as it is presented in each day. And when actual writing is part of that, or even editing, because I love editing too, then it's really a blessed day. And in terms of what balances that, what gives me the kind of connection to the muse, the connection to the inspiration, is that I have a spiritual life. I have a kind of yogic spiritual life but Jesus is in there because that's my culture and that was what I was raised on. I was doing some web surfing a couple of years ago and I saw this exquisite picture that was supposedly Jesus out in the jungle meditating with a bunch of animals. I mean, there was a tiger and their little rabbit and everybody was all around. And supposedly this was actually taken from life, that in many people believe that Jesus went to the Himalayas during his lost years and studied with yogis there. And supposedly this picture came from that. I don't know if it did or not, but I know that it spoke to me enough that I spent 2 hours on eBay trying to find it, and I did. So that picture is at the center of my altar. But also on my altar, there's Lakshmi. There's the Hindu goddess of beauty and abundance. And I think it's really important, especially for people who feel more comfortable in the world of ideas, in the world of spirit, to sometimes have something that grounds you to this world. And that idea of health and vitality and prosperity that Lakshmi represents makes sense. So she's on my altar. There's a pine cone from a tree that I met. And I'm not a big nature person. You know, a lot of people think, oh, you're vegan, you must love digging in the dirt. Well, not really. I live in a high rise in Manhattan. But last summer, I was able to go to a wonderful place called Lilydale, which is a spiritualist summer camp in upstate New York. And it had been on my bucket list to go there for years, and I finally got to. And among the wonderful experiences that I had when I was there was running into this giant pine tree on a labyrinth walk. And I mean, this was an entity to me. And I felt that his name was Horus, and maybe I made that up. I don't know. But to me, he's Horus, and I have one of his pine cones on my altar. And then I have a little triptych of pictures of Swami Vivekananda and Sri Ramakrishna and his wife. And they brought Vedanta to America, and Swami Vivekananda did, the others stayed in India. And Vedanta is a lovely way to understand Eastern thought, and that's been very important in my life. So I think in kind of describing my altar, I describe a little bit of my spiritual life. And I also know that we're all going in the same direction. Whatever people's worldview is, whatever their spiritual practice, hooray! Because we're on these beautiful parallel roads. And it makes me so sad whenever I hear people arguing about religion, because the word religion is Latin for to lead back. And we're all being led back. We're just not all on the very same road because then we get too crowded.
Well, they say all roads lead to Rome, right? So I love that you brought so much of your spiritual practice into this. The altar for me is a great place to where I feel grounded and supported when my life feels out of control sometimes. It's a place that I go to for that inner peace and just higher connection. I'm curious, since you are vegan and a yogi, what is the practice of like, what do you eat in a regular day? Or how often do you practice yoga? Are you rigid? Are you flexible? Like, because you've had 7 decades of practice. So I feel like we're getting the cheat codes of asking like, what does it really take to sustain like that yogic vegan lifestyle of holistic health?
Yeah. Well, it varies, and I certainly don't claim to be perfect about any of this. So only 5 decades of yoga, because I was 18 when I started practicing. My first teacher, I moved to London to go to drama school, actually. And when I was there, I started taking yoga. Yeah, I said drama school. I auditioned for drama school. I didn't get in. I went to fashion school. So just to be clear. But I started taking yoga, and my teacher is 99 now. And she's still alive. She still teaches a chair yoga class once a week. She lives in a 3rd floor walk-up, and she has a salon every Sunday morning for wonderful women. So that's the lineage. I feel just really, really fortunate to have run into her. So in terms of my own personal practice, I mean, it's varied widely over the years. I'll tell you what I do now. I teach 2 yoga classes a week in my building. I never did yoga teacher training all those years of doing yoga until the pandemic, when I was finally
Same.
somewhere in one place and had time. Did you guys do that?
The same, yeah.
And I never thought I would get yoga teacher registered at 70, but it was the right time. And then I went on and got registered as a Raja yoga teacher instructor as well. And so I do teach those 2 classes, and I love it that they're in my building because they're guaranteed. So I love integral yoga. When I left England and went back to Kansas City, it was into the arms of integral yoga, which is a beautiful Hatha yoga is the kind of asana practice, but they're all the philosophy, and that is there as well. And they're down in Greenwich Village, and I live uptown. So it's a little bit of a ride to get down there. And I was doing that twice a week. That brought me up to my 4. And then my husband became very ill. And so I don't leave for as much as I used to. So those classes I'm not taking. And yet every morning the mat gets out and I'm on the floor. It's just what I do. I get up, I drink water, I get on the mat, and just do a few minutes. When you talked about that in yoga, you're as young as your spine. It's like it doesn't take very long. You don't have to sweat or anything to just get yourself moving. And then a couple of other times a week, a longer session. But hatha yoga, or whatever kind of physical yoga you do, whether you're doing vinyasa or iyengar or whatever it is that speaks to you, that's just a teeny tiny part of yoga. Yoga is union with yourself, union with the divine. And so I feel that everything I do in my life, certainly imperfectly, is a kind of yoga. So the veganism is yoga, because ahimsa, nonviolence, non-harming, is yoga's first moral precept. So every time I have a meal, that's yoga. And even little things, like I know organizing and all that is kind of a trend now, and people love it, which is really good because it makes you feel so light. It's kind of like you talked about with the food. You can either feel all bogged down or you can feel light. And yet that is one of the yoga precepts as well, this idea of not being burdened with too much stuff, a parigraha, enough already. And so all these things, they can just look like good living, but to me, they're all yoga.
You're tapping into something I think is really important. And it's obvious that the theme from this talk that we've been having is the fact that you can choose whatever path you want, and that path is going to continuously change. How much you do at one part, the kind of writer or whatever career you're in will shift. Like everything is constantly in this flux. And I think so many people think that they have to find the perfect plan. And then once you have the perfect plan, then you just do that plan.
It'll work forever.
You just do that plan until you die. And for the most part, it's constantly shifting. I mean, there was a time where we did Ashtanga yoga for 90 minutes, 6 days a week. And it's like a religion. I mean, you're there every single time and you're sweating and feeling like you're going to die on the mat. And there comes a point where you just think, maybe I don't need all this. Maybe I'll do yin yoga for a while. Maybe I'll do something different. Maybe my workout will change. Maybe for a while, I feel like going back to the gym and lifting weights. Maybe I'll do some push-ups and some squats. I feel like we're constantly evolving as people, as humans. And it's amazing that I really like your take on spirituality, because I think that the path that we're all going down to now is sort of realizing there's so many benefits to different traditions and in different ways. There's so much to like honoring different cultures and figuring out what's worked for them and how they've been a part of something, and to kind of grab onto each one of those practices. I love the fact that you have sort of these different beings as part of your altar, not saying that one religion doesn't get to claim this person just because they decided to write a book about it. We all get access to all these, ascended masters, and anyone who's gone through a 12-step program definitely knows like how different your life is once you decide that there is a higher power and you're going to start living into that. And as I've gotten older, it seems like to me, that's become some of the most important things of anything that I do. This is a conversation that I wouldn't even have had when I was in my 20s, maybe even early 30s. And now at this point in my life, it does become a point where people are like, how do you practice meditation? Like, everything I do is a meditation. Everything I do is part of this yogic practice. It's not that like I'm trying to. It's not, well, once I pull my mat out, now I'm finally doing it. Now I'm finally living or
it's
trying.
An embodiment.
It's something that's totally different. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that you brought up the different religions and cultures, because I too have a Sarasvati Hindu statue on my altar next to like my dad's Christian, rock albums that he produced in the 70s. So I think it's just, I finally feel like our authenticity is being accepted, whereas culture for so long was trying to put us into a container that everyone had to fit. I always say I am a star shape that they tried to shove into a square box, and it just will never fit. And I feel like with advocates like you and us and other leaders out there who are willing to show up authentically and courageously, that is breaking the mold and breaking the form of culture to be able to plug in our own unique puzzle pieces together to make a much bigger, wide view of what is possible and how to create more harmony in the world. So I'm curious, what is the next passion project for you? I know that you're in like the editing and got to get this book out, but is there something stirring in your heart where you're like, I just really want to spend time with my partner and maybe not work so much, or I really want to travel? Like, what is really calling to you at this next chapter in your life?
Well, what a good question. And you're also telling me that I'm so caught up right now in the work, and also with my husband being in difficult circumstances, that I haven't really thought much about what's ahead. I mean, certainly if we move forward with the movie, that's going to be a big deal for a long time. But I think what's constant and consistent is I'm very dedicated to leaving the world better for non-human animals than I found it. So everything that I do, whether it's about spirituality, whether it's about well-being or growing older better, there's this underlying theme of veganism, kindness, harmlessness. And so often people, veganism, oh, that sounds so judgmental. I was watching something about a man who had survived one of those purity cults in the 90s, where the perfectly reasonable idea of chastity until marriage was turned into like some kind of very disturbing sort of practice. And he said, so in this purity cult, we were like, I don't know, vegans. Like, we felt like we were better than everybody else. I'm thinking, okay, this is how the world can see vegans. So I know on the one hand, I need to be careful with that. And I need to understand that it comes with baggage for some people. But on the other hand, it's just such a sweet way to live. It's just like it's not doing anything except expanding one's circle of compassion a little bit more than it was before we heard about it. So whatever I do in the future, it'll be for the spirit and it will be for the animals.
Well, speaking of compassion, I've got a serious question for you, because just last week, Chris and I were in the gym doing a little workout, and I just had a hysterical breakdown, crying, and just said to Chris, like, I just don't understand, like, how do I cope with feeling the torture and the pain that humans and animals go through? So can you talk to the very highly sensitive empath who, if she sees a dead bird or anything dead, in fact, like the dragonfly that was dying from the pesticides on the sidewalk, like sent me into this freaking sad just spiral? And I know that's not helpful for myself, my health and the planet, but how do you maintain compassion while being educated on what is happening? Like, where do you find the balance without like just crying all day?
It's very difficult. Yeah. Well, I can recommend a book. This is a memoir written by Sandy Nasanowitz, who's one of my Main Street Vegan Academy graduates, and it's called Oblivious, a vegan memoir. I highly recommend this book because even though I consider myself very empathic, I have never sat through Earthlings or Dominion. I'm not going to voluntarily watch all of that suffering. And I think that once you're vegan, you don't really have to. But I can go to a restaurant and somebody is eating meat at the next table, and I'm not personally impacted to the point where I would have to get up and leave. I mean, it's sad. Obviously, it's sad, but I also know I'm a very tiny minority. We're what, 2-3% on a good day. And so other people are going to do what other people do. That was always how I kind of dealt with it. But when I got to know Sandy and when I read her book, she really made it clear for me what it's like for people for whom you go to Thanksgiving dinner at your mom's house and there is a dead bird on the table. It's not just the sight of that, it's all the pain that that animal endured is being communicated right to you. And the idea that you just don't eat any of it, that's not enough. And so I think first I'll speak to all of us who are not empathic to the degree that you and Sandy are. It's real, and it's not just, oh, get over it. No, this is a big deal that you're going through life in feeling things that maybe we should all be feeling to a degree that the rest of us aren't. And I think you're perfectly within your rights to avoid anything that's too difficult. You know, what's you get points or something for making yourself miserable? And I know a lot of people, you know, they feel like they should watch graphic movies or they should do some of these things to be brave. It's fine to be brave, but it's also fine to feel. And if you're someone who feels, then you can be there for the next person who feels, to be supportive. And other than that, I don't really know what to say because I'm not coming from that degree of empathy. It was interesting. I'm going to have the people from the HBO series Chimp Crazy on my podcast. And I thought,
Wow.
oh gosh, I'm going to have to watch at least the first one. My husband had watched the whole series. And he said, "Oh, I don't think you're gonna want to." But it's like, well, I have to be a responsible journalist here. I can't have these people on and say, "Yeah, everybody should go watch your show," but not me. So I watched, and I found that there were parts certainly that were sad, parts that were wrong, but I was okay. I could get up and walk the dog and make dinner and do everything that I had to do, and that wouldn't be true for everybody. And I think we just really need to respect these various gifts that we all have, and empathy is certainly one of those. I wish I had a better answer to that one.
No, I think that's great. I think it's a perfect answer. And anytime we watched Chimp Crazy and it got crazy, I would just cover my eyes so I didn't have to bring that into my visual field and feel that.
I think it's really important though, something that you bring up, and that is to discover exactly where your food comes from and how it's treated. And we took a trip to Colorado, and on the drive from Texas to Colorado, we passed by this place called Quality Beef, and it's literally, I mean, just cows for days, and there's no grass, and they literally live on top of each other. And when I saw like a McDonald's ad or something like that, it's like, we're serving quality beef, and so it always made me think of like, I mean, it was horrible conditions at the time that we drove through there. I mean, we were meat eaters, and I remember just feeling disgusted. I was like, that's not the food. I for some reason, I guess, always pictured the animal in like perfect, show shape, and they're beautiful, and
like we're all getting Betsy.
They're constantly getting petted and loved, and it's just they died of old age or something, and that's 100% not how it is. And if you go through Texas or any of the other states that has huge chicken farms or anything like that, and you just drive by it, you don't even have to go in. If you just drive by it, the way that it smells from the road, and you sometimes can smell it for miles, it's so sickening. And it's not so much that I necessarily always try to like beat my diet into someone's mind. I find that never works. But it is, I think, so empowering to figure out what is this that I'm eating? How did this get to my plate? Who's holding it? What do they feel like? How are the animals treated? Does that fear transfer into what I'm eating? Am I just putting it now into my body? And like, what's the scoop with that? I feel like just starting that investigation of what's going on, and even from vegetable standpoint. I mean, like, Are they getting sprayed with pesticides? Like what exactly is happening? How are the soils? Are they being well maintained? Are they, genetically modified? Like what am I doing with my life and my body? And I feel like this whole conversation has been like steps to start having it in your own mind and bring your partner in and say like, hey, are we doing all the things that are in alignment with how we want to live, who we want to be, who we want to leave this place as? Are we doing the right things? And I think that for us, that was the conversation that really started it all. Is this, are we choosing it? Like if we're choosing all of our decisions and this is all sort of on us, are we doing the right things? Is this still just because our parents did it or just because we were taught that this was the way? Does it have to be? And is there something better that we could be doing? I feel like this is such an important, I feel like so many people die without ever asking this question. They just sort of, to your point, they don't
do what they've been told.
They don't really live. They don't get out the fine china. They don't celebrate more in their life. They're just head down, ambition, and just everything else they almost have blinders onto. And I feel like it destroys our capacity to make our own decisions. I mean, the big difference between us and other species is our ability to logically think and our ability to feel that compassion and empathy. And if we're not using it, like we sort of turn ourselves into robots. And it's so important for us to keep that human quality so that we can continue to love and be compassionate. And like you mentioned, being kind and just having that feeling, that connection with somebody else and saying like, yeah, I get you. It's okay. Times do get tough sometimes, but we're here together. And I think that once you start to realize that, your life starts to have so much more color in it and everything doesn't seem black and white. And it does feel like you have friends and you're not alone.
Yeah, I'm curious, with all of everything you're saying, this question keeps coming to mind. Like, what is your key secret to joy? Like, how do you maintain joy?
To me, it's to remember that there is a bigger picture. The idea that we are all this divine spark. It's one thing to believe that there is a higher power, and it's another thing to believe that we are part of that higher power, that we were breathed out by that higher power, and that makes us all connected. So we're connected to the divine, we're connected to one another, we're connected to all beings, and it's a lot easier not to eat somebody that you honestly believe that you're part of. And whenever we look into another person's eyes, whether they agree with us about politics or whatever, you can see we're connected. And the same when it's Rupert's eyes or another companion animal or an animal maybe rescued from a farm. There's just this wonderful connection. And that's where the joy comes from for me. And I just feel this doesn't quite connect to your question, but I do want to share my very favorite quotation, which comes from Mahavira, who's a saint in the Jain religion of India. And he said, "To every creature, their own life is very dear." And to me, when people ask why I'm vegan, I just quote that because what else is there? I mean, to every creature, their own life is very dear. And every living being has interests. They may not have the same interests that we do, but they have interests to live and seek pleasure and avoid pain. And in certainly any species beyond mollusks and some of those perhaps, and we don't really know what's going on with them, but certainly we know that birds and mammals, they're very attached to their families, to their mates. I mean, this is very advanced psychological functioning on planet Earth. And to just know that that's the case makes me very proud that this is my cause for my life. And I think everybody needs something like that, something to live for that's bigger than them. And for me, it's the animals. For other people, it's something else. And it doesn't matter what it is, as long as you got one.
I think that's so beautiful. And it just really relays right into the question we always love to wrap up our show with. And that is, what does living an elevated life mean to you?
I'm so excited to answer that. And first, I just want to share, I told you this when you invited me on the show, that not knowing that this was the name of your podcast, the last of the 10 sections of my book is called Elevate Everything. And then when I saw that we had this thing in common, that was very cool. And I will answer your question, although I may need to ask you to repeat it. But I did want to just let people know that if they were interested in taking a look at Age Like a Yogi at any online bookseller or independent bookseller, if you opt to pre-order, you can send your receipt to my assistant, which is just assist at victoriamoran.com. And that will get you invited to a free day-long workshop about living well and aging well with yoga and Ayurveda. That will happen January 12th. It's recorded if you're not available for the live day. And you'll also get the exclusive Age Like a Yogi e-cookbook. So I did want to let people know that. And you were asking me something about elevation. Can you repeat
Yeah, what
that?
does it mean to live an elevated life to you?
Mean to live an elevated life? Ooh, well, it means to take the high road. It means with every option, with everything that's presented, you can either do the, oh, well, okay, this is good enough, or you can opt to elevate. And that doesn't mean this overachieving that makes you exhausted. You know, some things, good enough is good enough. You don't really have to have the world's cleanest kitchen every single night. You know, not everything has to be perfect. But when it's something that speaks to your heart, you owe that this sense of elevation. I'm going to give this my best, as you guys do with all of your wonderful work, your beautiful cards, this program. And that's why I admire you, and lots of other people do too.
Wow. Thank you so much, Victoria, for sharing your wisdom, your knowledge, and for being on the show to celebrate your new upcoming book, Age Like a Yogi. We are so excited to support this 14th baby you've birthed into the world. And I know that this work is going to help transform people's lives and to give them permission to do it the way that they want in their own elevated 7 or above style. So thank you so much for tuning in. Where can people find you? Where do you like to show up if they wanted to ask you questions? I know I like to message you on Instagram, but is there somewhere you'd like our listeners to come find you and say hello?
Sure. Well, my author website is just my name, victoriamoran.com. And you can also find me on Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn at Victoria Moran Author.
Perfect. Thank you so much for being here, sharing your wisdom here on the Elevated Life podcast. We appreciate you so much. And thank you for shining a major light into our lives and being such an inspiration.